Hi, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Let me just, let's tone the music down just a tad. I like having that in the background. Always try to pick something for background that is suitable to the topic at hand. Today I decided that I need to talk about something that I've talked about in bits and pieces before, but never really captured in one episode like this as succinctly as I've captured maybe in some comments on social media and places like Quora and so forth when talking about the subject. So I'm going to kind of lay it out. What is the divine plan? Who is God? And what that has to do with humanity. Okay, so first off, let's start with who is God. God was the first soul. Maybe not the first soul, but the first one that came up with a sustainable way of creating thoughts that didn't drive him to suicide or self-repression or madness. Think of it that way. So if you're one of these folks that say, well, gosh, I can't be a God because what happened before God? Well, okay, maybe there were other souls that tried to create, tried all sorts of ideas, and were so unsuccessful with those ideas that they no longer have any credence in the spiritual world. Okay, there you go, scientists. Chew on that. Tell me that you can disprove that. Okay, so this first soul, what sort of ideas did this first soul come up with to rein in all the other souls who are out creating busily in their image of perfection? All sorts of new ideas, all sorts of new realities that may or may not have been very productive, may or may not have, produced a big bang that caused an expanding universe that seems to be able to go on forever. Who knows what else is happening there? What's going on in black holes? A lot of interest in that topic right now, right? Could it be the seeds of what comes next are there? The seeds of new universes. Maybe a black hole represents the leadership of a soul drawn down into a sort of a personal shell of meditation, where this soul is deciding what sort of universe they want to be the god of. Okay, so backing up a little bit, I'm gonna come and go a little bit here because the pieces of the story I think are better told by giving you glimpses of parts of it, little tempting tidbits, and then coming back to the narrative of how it all happened. Okay, so this first successful creator, what do you think they created? They may have experimented with saying, I'm going to make all the other souls that I create subservient to me, so that they have to do exactly what I say and think what I want them to think and be what I want them to be. And that might have seemed to not very bright soul as the best way to get things done the most quickly. However, every single time this experiment has been tried, it's failed. It's ended up with a very stale, maybe stable creation, but not one that's growing and evolving and very exciting. So, after making that mistake, God or some other soul gave God the idea that, let's give people free will. Let them decide what kind of God they want to be. Give them all the abilities that I started out with. Create them in my image. and see what they can come up with. Maybe they'll have a better idea than me, because I'm all out of ideas. And free will was a pretty good idea, and turned out to be working pretty well until perhaps the world of thought, the spiritual world, got really crazy because everybody was off thinking their own thoughts, doing their own thing, and there was no sort of policing system to say, hey, these thoughts are not very healthy. Probably anger was created in this period. Hate, envy, all sorts of negative things would come out of an unregulated spiritual world. So God or some other bright soul decided, had an idea. Said, hey, what if instead of doing all our thought creating in this thing and never really knowing if the thought is good or bad, we have this place where we can go to test our thoughts to see how good they are. And we could start that with the thoughts about what this other place should be like. Maybe that thought included something like establishing a framework of space, establishing a few simple elements to interact with each other, energies to interact with each other, gradually adding more and more laws, more and more rules. When something was useful, you kept it. Light was a really useful invention to give a sense of sensibility to creations, an aura, if you will, that you could describe in terms of a frequency. So that idea was kept. Ideas mounted, kept on going, and this was working pretty good for a while. And the universe got to be a pretty interesting and complicated place. But once again, this realm of testing had some issues. One of them was that all these artificial creations were basically programmed to do what we told them to do in our experiments. And if you know much about science, you know that confirmation bias is the scientist's worst enemy. You already know what you want to conclude from your experiment, so you design the experiment to prove what you already think you know is true. So, how are we going to resolve this? Well, let's give our creations some ability to think for themselves. How do we do that? Well, we take these creations and we assign new souls to these creations to sort of be their guide, their leader. And let's see where that goes. And let's see if they can come up with ideas for organizing themselves that didn't occur to us. And somewhere in there, between the ideas of heaven and the ideas of the physical realm, we develop things like life, DNA, RNA, species, space travel, you name it. A lot of things that would never occur if you were a being of pure thought, whose thoughts could manifest anything. Might not occur to you to develop a lot of technology that we've developed or seen developed or see around us in this world. Okay, so this is how life came about as we know it, as we think of it, physical life. And as things developed, it turned out that, you know what? If we're going to test people's ideas, they should have some skin in the game. So, if you have an idea to create this new species that has this weird thing called sex, which you think is going to solve some problem, then, okay, you go become one of these. You can give up your godhood. You can give up your power and prestige in the physical, in the spiritual realm, and you can come and be part of this experiment. Eat your own dog food. Eat your own God food. And that's how the laws of reincarnation and karma came about. And it was no longer every soul just got to sit in the spiritual realm and think and create anything they wanted, manifest anything they wanted. They had to earn it through reincarnation and karma and learning. And spiritual power was not something that was just given for free. It was something that was earned. And it was earned through the collective enthusiasm and support of other souls. Each soul gets its own ration of spiritual energy based upon how advanced it is, how much it's learned, how successful it's been with its ideas. As you can imagine, a very old soul like God has a lot of influence, but is not all-powerful, is not all-knowing, is not all-seeing, cannot possibly keep track of all the children out busily trying to create and to advance, each in their own way. In fact, there are who knows how many creators who have advanced to the same level of power as God. And they have their own personalities and their own interests, and some of them are off creating their own universe the way that they think is best. Others are working on variations of God's universe. Call it the prime universe, because that's how things work. There is an idea, a shared dream among all souls of perfection. And many souls who like the idea of perfection like to contribute to this particular prime universe that is the one that God is the principal entity of. Now, what does that mean? Being the principal entity of a universe. Okay, well, this is how the laws evolved to include reincarnation and karma. Do you think that powerful spiritual beings would willingly commit to coming down to a planet like Earth as a human being for a lifetime, forgetting everything that they knew, having no special advantage because of reincarnation amnesia, being born to, well, maybe you had some choice of what parents you were born to and what era you happen to choose to incarnate in, but you don't get to choose everything. You don't know everything that's happening, because if you did, there would be no such thing as free will, right? So, yeah, I mean, I can touch on any spiritual theory you want, and I can poke holes all through it unless it matches what I'm telling you right now, because I've worked it through for myself. And that's how I'm so sure about it. On top of having talked it over with some pretty high-level spiritual entities that I seem to have a pretty long-standing relationship with over many incarnations. Anyway, so this system basically was refined to the point where, you know what, if we want to test a really, really dangerous new idea, we don't want to do it by throwing it out, and even, you know, in one entire universe before turning it on. Let's go arrange to create a special little test area within one universe. Let's create a solar system, give it a few planets, send maybe some technology from other solar systems that have been useful in past creations to get it started, and basically set up an experiment of a social experiment, because these incarnated souls are social beings who think for themselves and have free will. So they are part of the experiment. And anybody who's a social scientist can tell you how much more difficult that kind of experiment is to set up, because you've got to make sure the subjects don't know too much about the experiment, or they will bias the results, which is another reason for reincarnation karma. Okay, so basically spin ahead a few bazillion years to where we're at today. This planet we are on is part of a major social experiment. So major that they decided the only way it was approved for testing by the senior creators was to put it in this crazy little solar system out on the end of this of one spiral arm of this thing called the Milky Way, this huge galaxy among even bigger galaxies. It was arranged that some more advanced beings from previous experiments came and engineered species that were conducive to the plan, taking the best of what had worked before, instituting them here. It was a very political thing, because there were some successful species that were based upon reptilian DNA. Other successful species were based on amphibian or bug DNA or whatever. And like any experiment that we do today in the UN, it was influenced by a lot of different people with different agendas, different souls with different agendas, both material souls who maybe didn't even realize that they were part of a spiritual experiment, and the spiritual souls that were more cognizant of what was going on, the senior creators. And everybody had an idea of, like any major change. If you're doing a social experiment, the whole point of doing social experimentation is to try to prove or disprove something about how souls interact with each other successfully, how government can be more successful, how systems can be organized to be more sustainable and more equitable, more fair. Because, as those early experiments showed, if the system wasn't fair, souls became very, very unhappy. And unhappy souls do very dystopian things. Okay, so here we are with this experiment here. I'm not going to tell you I know all the details and all the wherefores and wherewithals of this experiment. But I do know what the whole point of this experiment was. And how it fits into the history of our species. If you go back and you read the writings, and look at the cave paintings, and study the physical remains of our species and other species that we're starting to realize have visited here or other planets or influenced our species, you will come to the conclusion that there have been many false starts in this experiment. Many attempts maybe to accelerate it by adding a certain bit of influence and technology from another solar system, from another dimension, another universe, to this one, hoping that that is going to accelerate things. And early on, it was thought that humanity would be able to achieve the ends of this experiment, getting a lot of hand-holding. And because souls are naturally, at least in their happy natural state, want to be helpful to each other, want everyone to be happy, there was a lot too much help given. And it didn't work out. We reached dead ends in the experiment. And ask any scientist who experiment fails to prove what they wanted to prove, do they throw out all their equipment? No. They sit down and talk with their colleagues and try to come up with a better experiment, reusing what they've already have from the old experiment and building new stuff. Yeah, maybe some of it gets thrown out. Maybe you built this big particle accelerator that you realize, oh crap, it can only get up to, 100 trillion electron volts, and that's not enough to see if this new particle exists. So you chuck that part and you build a new ring somewhere else, or a new CERN or whatever, or you even put it in space because it's got more applicability there. But you don't throw out the species that did the last experiment if you don't have to. You might throw out some of them. You might take away a bunch of technology. You might even take away spiritual abilities from this species that prove to be harmful to the experiment. You know, it might simple-mindedly occur to you that experiments would go faster if everybody had godlike powers. Turns out this one didn't work that way. And if you read the old legends and stuff, you'll hear about wars between gods. Some of them were gods from elsewhere, and some of them were demigods created by mixing of that elsewhere capability with humanity. And many times we had to start over. How does things get started over when you're doing spiritual experimentation? Well, that technology advances too. Back in the old days, if the experiment wasn't working well, you had to wait for the sun to go supernova, or have it collide with a black hole, or one planet collide with another and destroy everything on it. And this system here has seen those advances in technology. At some point, we had the technology to spread things via virus. RNA viruses, DNA viruses, even more advanced viruses called bacteria, more advanced viruses called civilizations. It was all a way of spreading technology into the right place at the right time to conduct new experiments. And if you realize that, you'll realize that the Gaia experiment has been going on for a long time. Now, how would an experiment go on that long and not have the senior creators just give up on it and say, this idea is never going to work? Well, because it's a very big experiment. And the biggest experiments all lead back to mistakes that the first creators made. Holes in their theories of everything, holes in their ideas to solve problems. Well, let's talk about reincarnation and karma. That's a nice system, and free will. It's a nice system, but you know what? It can seem pretty unfair to somebody who's maybe midway along their journey to whatever kind of God that they hope to become, and runs across just a myriad of low-level souls that are like kid in a candy shop, teenager out on their first date, loose cannons. And it can get really frustrating to have a passion, to have an idea that's constantly thwarted by some idiot who doesn't even know how to play the game. And that has a side effect of creating unhappiness among the senior creators. And that unhappiness can cause those senior creators to be a lot less like what you'd think God would be, and a lot more like what you think Satan would be. how do we fix that problem? We can't just take away free will. We can't say necessarily that, oh, well, we get free will, but you have to do whatever we say. This has all been tried before. I like that song from the Big Bang, or no, the same group, the Bare Naked Ladies. It's all been done. It's all been done before. This is a very spiritual song, and once you come to my way of thinking, which if you think long enough, you will, you'll understand a lot of songs have a deeper meaning that was inspired by the senior creators, who have a lot of faith in this experiment, have a lot of faith in humanity, despite all the silliness that you guys get up to, trying to test the ultimate idea. What is this ultimate idea? And I hope I've gotten you excited enough to wonder what all this stuff is about. Okay, so it all comes down to the continuing argument about whether free will should be free or not. And believe me, the senior creators have tried every which way and shape or form of administering free will and haven't come up with a way to make it fairly or fairly distributed. If you take away free will, I mean, and you see that in this planet, right? You take away people's free will by giving them too much government, they become unhappy. You give them too much free will and say, oh, knock yourselves out, do whatever you want, and they end up creating even worse governments than they overthrew by replacing them. This is the story, basic story of Marxism. The idea that if you tear down the old something, well, and just give us whatever we're saying is going to be the new utopia, you get something worse than before, because you've got people who are so ideologically sure of perfection that they have no problem with imposing their will on everybody else, even to the point of death. Okay, so it's a difficult problem, and the senior creators were wrestling with this for a long time. And one of them hit upon an idea that seemed crazy at first, but actually made a lot of sense. And that idea was, okay, so let's back up a little bit. How do souls get created? Okay, well, back before there was any physical universes, souls were created just by a thought. This first creator, or the first creators, thought, oh, I think I'd like to have a son. And I want my son to have these characteristics. Or daughter. I mean, sex didn't exist back then, but those characteristics sort of defined it. And if you go back to this first successful creator, his first son, his first creation was like a son. I want, because think of it. If I'm God and I can do anything, think of anything and just make it so, what would be the first thing I want to create? Oh, somebody like me, but maybe who can think independently and give me a different point of view. That would be so nice. Now, I can't give them everything because, gosh, I'm smart enough to know that if I create this other being, give them all of my knowledge, all of my experience, they'll either think exactly like me, or they'll have as much power that if they don't like what I'm thinking, they'll be at odds with me, because neither can force their opinion, force their rule on the other. So the first father created the first son that way, and didn't give him all the knowledge, gave him all the ability, all the capabilities, and the ability to think for themselves, which from a spiritual standpoint is the essence of free will. That worked really well. The two together came up with a lot of ideas that would never have occurred to one by itself. But of course, they did come into disagreement. And when they did, because the first soul, the father, retained the power of a father to punish, which from that standpoint of a pure being of consciousness means the ability to make you not exist. That's the original veto, and it still exists today. Parents have, to some extent, the power to ensure that their kids don't exist. That's abortion. And it's still as contentious a subject as it ever was. Okay, so these two got to the point, probably many times, of, you know what, I'm just so fed up with you, don't exist. And maybe I'll let you come back, I'll make a copy of you before you come back and let you come back after not existing for a while, and then you'll appreciate my point of view. And this is how the first parental relationship developed. And as you can imagine, after time, this other soul became somewhat resentful of their parent, because sometimes they were really sure that their idea was better. And they had to agree with God because God was going to disappear them. God will get you if you don't do that. And this is the first manifestation of what we all, as parents, know is teenhood. When you think you know better than the old man, when you think you know better than your parents, what's right? And you go off crusading against your parents on things that you don't agree with them on, and you want to change the world and blah, 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 blah. And we've seen that cycle after cycle, haven't we? And anybody who says the kids are right or who says the parents are right is a dogmatic fool, because there's truth in both. And the real dystopia is in the polarization of these positions to the point where they become toxic. And we've all seen that. Okay, so let's go back to these two souls in contention, the teenage boy and the old man. What did they come up with as a workable solution for their problem? They created another soul, a peacekeeper, a tiebreaker. Maybe as capable as either of them, maybe with a few limitations at first. Always feeling like number three. Always feeling like the afterthought. Oh, you love brother more than me. This third soul helped out a lot. Solved a lot of differences. But because of the subordinate position of the order of their birth even, began to be resentful of, you guys, you never even listen to me. Sometimes I have better ideas than either of you. And you just want me to make the decisions and to be the nice one that smooths all your feathers and makes you be friends again. And you're trying to push your side and be on your side. And I'm tired of being battered around by you two guys. So you know what? I'm going to think for myself. And this is the first women's lib movement, before women even existed. This third soul was the archetype of the female. Created for all the right, perfect reasons, with love and an intent to do good. Caused even worse turmoil than had existed before between the first two souls. And that kind of gets back to the subject of what is the plan for Earth? Why does sex exist? Why is it such an important part of our species? I mean, there's hardly any more divisive issue than man versus woman and the physical differences that make it less pleasant to be a woman. Let's be honest. We could put women in charge of the entire planet right now, and they would still be the only ones that could bear children. They would still have to deal with their periods. Well, maybe not if they use birth control, but then the species wouldn't last very long then, would it? Why do this? It's got a psychopathic voyeur that likes to see pain and suffering. Some people think that, and that's maybe a lot of the justification for atheism. No, this planet came into existence to solve a fundamental archetypal problem. The most fundamental problem there was, the original sins. The conflicts that resulted from the creation of the first and the second soul. If you look around you, the patterns of those conflicts are all around you, and they're the same, and they repeat, because that's the nature of creation. Creation is all about fractals, about defining the numerical equation that sets the pattern of everything that gets created, and doesn't allow things that are not consistent with that creative pattern to survive, unless they prove to have an energy that is more than the energy it takes, that exerted by the force of the current fractal to maintain its structure, maintain its patterns. And this is the essence of all creation, evolution, all change. If you're going to make a change, the energy of the change needs to overwhelm the energy that's trying to keep the multiverse the same, at least locally, wherever the change is. And that's how spiritual experiments work. That's why we create planets like the Earth. That's why we create species like humanity. It's a disturbance in the force, if you will. Not all disturbances are bad. They're just experiments on, what if I change this? Will things be better? Will the fractal pattern be more beautiful? Will it spread to new dimensions? Will it develop new offshoots that we never thought of? That's the essence of creation, and it's all based on fractals. That's why, the trinity of mathematics, physics, and philosophy, even though they don't really touch on anything spiritual, are somehow intimately entwined with understanding anything spiritual. So I can tell you that this experiment going on this funny little planet Earth is really a very special one. It goes all the way back to trying to solve these three most fundamental issues. Is it going to completely solve them? No, it never does. But the genius idea that is the reason we're all here is a solution for the problem of free will. And the solution is this. Remember I was talking about how souls were created, either by pure thought, or once physical universes existed, they could be created by things like the appearance of an antiparticle pair. And one wanders off, the antiparticle wanders off to another dimension and disappears, and the particle stays here, and you have a positive matter universe and negative matter universes spring up, or they annihilate with each other and only exist for the briefest moment, but there's two new souls wandering around the multiverse looking for meaning, looking for purpose in their next incarnation. That's another way that souls get born. There's a new way that souls get born that doesn't originate with this planet, but it is very closely tied to what's going on in this planet, and that is new souls can be born as the result of an idea. That's actually closest to how original souls were born. If I have an idea, it creates a spirit of that idea. And ideas can start carrying their own character, their own essence. And that's how things work now, in conjunction with all of this idea technology that we've had to develop. Before humanity was forced to develop language, communication was done telepathically. I know what you think, you know what I think. It was the way we communicate in heaven. And that kind of communication needs no language. It needs no conduit. It needs no interpretation. The knowledge is just there. And this ties back to what some people experience as they're about to enter heaven. This feeling of connectedness, of, oh, I suddenly see all this knowledge. Oh, I'm part of God. No, it's not true. You're just feeling the connectedness of telepathy, of this instantaneous communication. And you're assuming that that means that somehow you're in heaven, you're one with everything. I'm sorry, that's just not true. It's just a different communication technology that's so far in advance of what you know that it blows your mind. And it's useful. It certainly is useful, because this feeling is what attracts souls to end their current incarnation, because everything is voluntary. That's the essence of free will. If you don't want to die, you don't have to die. You can live on as a zombie with whatever problem or anything that you've got. You can sit there in your body till hell freezes over and enjoy the maggots eating up your body if you want. That's kind of what some of atheist heaven is like. Scientist heaven is kind of like that. Okay, what's going to happen to me after I die? Okay, I'm almost dying. All right, I'm going to phase out. Ooh, this wonderful feeling of connection. Okay, I'm still here. What's going on? Bugs are eating me and my flesh is dissolving. See, I told you, that's all that happens to you after you die. Why am I thinking about it? This is weird. And then, you'll have a flash and you'll be into your next life and not even know that you had this, or maybe you remember a bad dream like that. A lot of people have bad dreams that they think, oh my God, where did that come from? My crazy imagination. No. Everything that comes to our brains is coming through the power of thought. If you have a dream in any sense, it's because you had some inadvertent connection with this or another realm of the multiverse that just happened to resonate with you that night. That's why our dreams tend to have some connection with what was going on in our lives during the day, because the energy that we have defines the resonances that we attract. Now, this is the truth behind the so-called law of attraction, which is another of the really stupid simplifications of things that's causing a lot of problems right now. You got people running around saying, oh, I can create anything with the power of my mind. All I have to do is get my thoughts at the highest level, the highest vibration, and I can do anything. This is really narcissistic. Please don't do this. Nobody gets to create anything unless you create a local preponderance of spiritual energy, enough to overcome the pressure of the fractal pattern around you. And I can tell you that an individual human, unless they happen to be one of the senior creators on an incarnation, doesn't have command of enough energy to do more than make a royal pain in the ass of themselves. And even if they do, they're not God. They're not part of God. They might be getting close to the God level of understanding of consciousness, where they become more active and aware creators. But let me tell you that your first touch of that, even your nth touch of it, if you've touched it before and you're facing it in another incarnation, until you get to the other side, until you become a spiritual being again, and you're not stuck in a meat sack somewhere or stuck in an idea. You don't know everything. You're awakening to it. And even the senior creators, when they incarnate, have to go through all of the pain and suffering and learning that you do. Now, maybe they get an easier path through it because they've made so many mistakes in the past that they're pretty good at recognizing what making a mistake is all about. And this is the truth behind people that you see having an easy time through life. You can call it luck, but no, it's basically experience, knowing what's a good decision and what isn't. And that's why more times than not, these people who breeze through life with success after success after success eventually get blindsided by something they never experienced before. Maybe they've been very successful in another species that didn't have sex, and they're learning about sex for the first time as a human being and feel very challenged by it. And they breeze along just fine until they fall in love. And their whole life falls apart. Or they can't deal with having only one partner, like the world expects of them, or their partner expects of them. And they cheat. People's lives get destroyed because they don't have the experience not to destroy themselves. And collectively, the human species, which is mastered by an oversoul, there's an oversoul of the human species that represents the idea for which the human species was created. Has blind sides too. The biggest blind side for a soul like that is that because your identity is tied up to this species, you are the most humanist soul in the planet. The species is your whole reason for existence. And a god like that can be pretty dangerous. Would destroy other species, would even destroy the whole planet, thinking that they're preserving the few favorites that they have of their chosen species. And that kind of explains what's going on with the monotheist crowd. Your God may be the God of Christianity, may be the God of Islam, may be the God of Hinduism, may be the God... Well, Hinduism has multiple gods, so Hinduism is kind of a special case, but then again, Hindus themselves individually have certain gods that they think are more powerful and they worship more. Those are not the highest level gods in the multiverse. They, in many cases, are first-timer gods. They've risen up through the ranks, incarnation after incarnation, and they finally have a Messiah life, have a Messiah idea. They live a Messiah life, prove their idea, and they get to be a god. And they think, wow, I've arrived. I can tell you that that's just the first rung of the God levels. That's maybe comparable to getting to be an angel for those of you who are Christian, or I think Muslims and Jews also believe in angels. But that's basically a good way to describe the first level of godhood in the spiritual hierarchy. They're not perfect, and the Bible tells you so. There's fallen angels all over the place, right? And to some extent, every incarnated soul is a fallen angel. It's not bad to fall. It's not bad to stumble. That's how we learn. And in fact, a fallen angel could just as easily be somebody who screwed up their God assignment as it is some God who said, I've been the god of fungus for too long now, and I'm tired of all this itching I feel as the result of my creations. So I want to be the god of humanity. How am I going to be the god of humanity? Well, I've got to create what humanity is, and then I've got to go live it. And this is the essence of the Messiah stories. Whatever you're pursuing, whatever your passion is, you're effectively the Messiah of that thing. Whether it's the Justin Bieber fan club or the NHL, world peace or shopping network. There's a lot of different souls with different passions, and that's how we define where our place is in the grander scheme of things. And everybody has a chance to be a god eventually, and every god has to prove their worth, or they get demoted and told, you need to reincarnate, you need to go prove yourself again. You say you're god of fungus, well, there's some crappy stuff going on in the fungus world, so we're going to send you down to fix it. Or you lose your position. And that's effectively how heaven works. It's not a kingdom. It's not a dictatorship. It's not an oligarchy. It's most like a republic, with karma and reincarnation being the ultimate check and balance system. So, one of the things that humanity just needs to understand is any authoritarian system of government, any system of government that puts power into the hands of fewer people with more money, with more influence, is a failure. Always will be a failure. It doesn't matter what their ideology is, how good their intentions, etc., etc. It is not going to work. Ever. And if you just get that through your thick gourds, you might have a chance of surviving this experiment, which I can tell you is near its conclusion. Because the virtual soul idea worked. That's where we were going with this experiment. The new laws of the multiverse have a new way of creating souls. Souls can be created as stand-ins for a soul that is not willing to abide by the standards of the universe that they are currently in. If you're a human and you're about to do something that's going to seriously impede another soul's progress in a way that they didn't sign up for when they were planning their incarnation, poof, you're shuttled off to another universe, a virtual universe where everything looks like here and acts like here, but it's totally concocted for remediation of your problem, of your authoritarian designs to use other souls. And back in the Prime universe, back in God's universe, you merrily go along as a virtual soul for as long as need be until the real soul has learned its lesson. Now, these virtual souls, you might think, oh, that's the ultimate slave. They have no control over themselves. They're just doing the divine plan. They don't get to choose anything. Their choices are all set for them. They know that. They know that before they incarnate. They're given a choice. New souls get a choice of being born the old way. Old ways. There are many old ways to be born, but they're also given the choice of, you know what, we've got this soul who's incarnated right now as a human being in New York City, and they're about to go murder somebody. And that murder is not part of a plan that's going to teach the souls involved something that they wanted to learn. They needed to learn. We needed to go step in there and make sure that murder doesn't happen. And they do. And the reward they get for this, they know that they're giving up their free will. The reward is that they get all the knowledge, all the experience of the soul they stand in for. And at the end of their assignment as a virtual soul, they get to reincarnate again with all that experience and knowledge under their belt. It's a very attractive proposition for a new soul, as opposed to being born as a particle, the oversoul of a particle, or being born as the oversoul of a photon. So there's no end of souls that want to come and be stand-ins to help other souls avoid your messes. And I can tell you that doesn't mean that you can just get away with anything and there's no consequences. Because when you are about to transgress against another soul in a way that you have not agreed on heretofore, which you won't know because of reincarnation amnesia, you're going to get blinked out to another universe that's not God's universe. It's played by a whole different set of rules that are basically ginned up to give remedial training to a certain kind of soul. So, I hope this gives a new context to what I mean by karma. This is a great improvement to the old system of karma, where you could step on somebody and cause a karmic debt that wasn't really your fault. Okay? In the new rules, anything you're suffering, you could be absolutely sure it's because you made somebody else suffer. So think good and hard about everything you do. Especially think good and hard about everything I said today. I think it's about time to conclude this episode, which I think was a pretty good one. If you liked it, share, subscribe, drop me a line. If you want to send a donation, knock yourself out. I don't need the money. I'm retired now. As long as Social Security stays solvent, I'll be in pretty good shape. But I really hope you'll take the time to listen. You'll take the time to listen with an open mind. And you'll take the time to explore and test and prove. And I would love to have somebody come and prove me wrong. Tell me you're all full of shit, Rob. It's not the way it works. Come and convince me that the Christian God is the true story. Come and convince me the Islam God is the true story. Come and convince me there's no God. Come and convince me that we're in the Matrix and the gods are bad people trying to make us miserable and feed off our energies. I've heard it all. And I tell you, I can refute it all. And I can set you on a new path. And you don't even have to give up your religion. Religions are fundamentally pretty good things, to the extent that they give us a pattern for living a good life where we don't hurt others. And if you think about anything good in religion, no matter what religion it is, it's those ideas that help us live together in harmony, in peace. Not the imposed peace of a dictatorship, but a desired peace, a shared peace that comes from a shared set of values, a shared set of ideas. I just hope you'll come to a better religion, because the ones that you've been clinging to for so long, and especially the new ones you've created in the last 100 years, like communism and atheism and materialism and commercialism and globalism, those are really inherently dystopian religions, as well as this cosmic oneness bullshit. It can be useful to an extent, but they're all very narcissistic positions that encourage you to think that your ideas are better than anybody else. And that's not true. You can't stand, and that's why none of you can sit down in the same room with somebody that has a different opinion and have a rational conversation. Because anytime your ideas are challenged, you explode. You go ballistic. You want to attack. I won't attack anybody for challenging my ideas. I can fit them into my ideas. If they don't fit, I'll find a way to make them fit and explain it in a way that doesn't force me to accept evil, something that everybody knows is evil, like exterminating half the planet because we're worried about overpopulation, or vaccinating them to death, which is a possibility. I didn't say it was a definite thing. I'm saying that if you thought human population was the biggest problem we're facing, you could very easily come to a mindset that would be very evil and destructive and indicative of having a God complex. And every human created religion has an element of a God complex, of thinking, oh, if only I had all the power, or if only my God had all the power, everything would be perfect. That's not the way the multiverse works. That's not the way the real God works. That's not the way any God that gets to stay a God for very long can be allowed to work. Yeah, at the lower God levels, you do make a lot of mistakes, and some of them are really jumped up assholes. And they're allowed to do that for a time because it's the only way to get past that level and onto a higher level of consciousness to where the real Godhood happens. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune in for another. And until then, this is Rob Trump with the Omnist Hour.